Now we're going to look at how to write the equation of perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are two lines that meet to form a 90-degree angle, or a right angle. So you can see that down here, this yellow line and this white line, they make a 90-degree angle. This edge and this edge make a 90-degree angle. The corner of the flag is a 90-degree angle. The corner on this tennis court is a 90-degree angle. So these lines are perpendicular. Though each railroad tie is perpendicular with the metal bar, metal rail. Okay, so perpendicular lines are lines that form 90-degree angles, or right angles. So here's an equation, or a line, and we want to draw a perpendicular line. Well, if we just eyeballed it, we know it would have to look something like that. Okay? I just kind of randomly sketched that, but that would kind of make a 90-degree angle, or a right angle. When I look at this line, we already know this guy's slope. This guy's slope was up 3 over 1, so it was a positive 3 over 1. To make a perpendicular line, it has to be negative. It's got to be the opposite of what this guy is. And this guy actually is perpendicular. Did a pretty good job. But his slope is down 1 over 3. So the slope of the blue line was 3 over 1, and the slope of the perpendicular line, that's the symbol for perpendicular, is negative 1 over 3. What do we call these two numbers? We call them opposite reciprocals. Opposite reciprocals. Opposite means the sign is different. One number's positive, one number's negative. Or you can think of them as reflections of each other. Okay? But opposite means if one's positive, the one's negative, or if one's negative, the other's positive. Reciprocal means you flip the fraction. So instead of 3 over 1, it's 1 over 3. Let's just list a few opposite reciprocals. If I said the slope was 2/3, the perpendicular line would have a slope of opposite reciprocal. So that's positive, so I become negative, and I flip the fraction. If I had a slope of negative 4, well, the perpendicular slope has to be the opposite, so it would be a positive number. And then I have to flip the fraction. If you don't see a fraction, you can always put it over 1. So the flip of 4 over 1 would be 1 over 4. One more. If the slope is negative 1/5, then the perpendicular slope has to be the opposite. The opposite of a negative is a positive. And the reciprocal would be 5 over 1. If you wanted to write that as just 5, you could. So that's what perpendicular lines do. They don't have the same slope like parallel lines. They have opposite reciprocal slopes. And make sure you put this right here in that box on your notes. Pause the video if you have to. So I want to write the equation of a line that passes through negative 3, 2, and is perpendicular to this line. Again, I'm just going to graph it so you can see it. You don't have to do that on the test, but I'm just going to graph it. We want a line that's perpendicular and goes through negative 3, 2. You can see the line has to have a positive slope, right? The word perpendicular means that the slopes is the opposite reciprocal. So what is this guy's slope? He's negative 4, or negative 4 over 1. Negative 4 over 1. The perpendicular slope then has to be the opposite, so positive, flipped, 1/4. So now I have my slope, and to write the equation 9, I need a slope, and I need an x and a y. So now I can come to what I'm used to doing. My y is 2. My new slope is 1/4, right? Up 1 over 4. My x is negative 3, and I don't know my b. and you would get 2 3/4 equals b. So your equation would be y equals, don't use the old slope, use the new slope, 1/4 x plus 2.75 or 2 3/4 or 11/4, however you want to write it. That y-intercept can be written, this number can be written several different ways. Write the equation of a line that's perpendicular to this line and goes through that point. Well, again, perpendicular means opposite reciprocal slopes. So that means I need to know this guy's slope. I cannot find his slope by looking at it. To get his slope, I've got to turn it into y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to add or subtract 5x from both sides. Negative 4y equals negative 5x plus 16. And then I'm going to divide by negative 4. Again, this is not new. This is old stuff. And I get y equals positive 5/4 minus 4. So what is the original line slope? The original line slope is 5/4. To be perpendicular, I need the opposite reciprocal. So the perpendicular slope would be a negative flip. So now I have my new slope, and they gave me an x and a y. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to type it into my equation. Y equals mx plus b. My y is 5. My m is negative 4/5 now, because that's the new slope, times negative 3 plus b. That's 12/5 plus b. Subtract 12/5 from both sides, and you might get 2.6 equals b, or depending on what your calculator said, you might have gotten 13/5 equals b, or you might have even gotten 2 3/5. Anything like that would have been okay. So then my final equation is y equals my new slope plus my new y-intercept. And this is your perpendicular line. If you graph this line and you graph this line, they would be perpendicular. Last set of problems. Write equations perpendicular to y equals 8. Well, y equals 8, talked about this lots, it's a horizontal line. To be perpendicular to a horizontal line, you need a vertical line, straight up and down. So I need a straight up and down line that goes through negative 3, 5. The question is, what would be the equation of that line? Well, because it's perpendicular and it's going up and down, it's going to have to be x equals, and where does it cross the x-axis? At negative 3. I could have told by looking right there. Now, let's look at this line. X equals negative 3. And we just graphed that one. I want to be perpendicular to it. Well, what's perpendicular to an up and down line? A straight across line. Straight across through 7, 2. Straight across lines have to start with y equals. And I can look at the graph and see it crosses at 2, or I can look at my y value and my point. And those are the answers. They're that easy. Whenever it's horizontal and vertical, don't think about it much, or don't try to do all the steps. Just think about it, think through it. Maybe graph it, or just think through the steps. Got 2 problems for you to try. Pause the video, work through them, unpause it, see how you did. Here's the answer to the first one. You can pause the video and look back through the work, but I'm going to go ahead and work out the next problem. All right, this one. This line is horizontal. To be perpendicular, I have to be up and down. Up and down starts with x equals, and then I looked up here, my x value was 2, so that's my equation.